Good afternoon. Again, my name is Dale Wallstrom. I'm President and CEO of LifeScience Alley. Welcome to the afternoon plenary session. We're delighted once again to thank our partners, FedEx, the University of Minnesota, the Greater Msp, as well as the Mayo Clinic. Having our primary sponsors, our premier sponsors here is tremendously helpful, and their messaging today has been phenomenal. So I also want to thank all of our sponsors. I'd like the rest of our sponsors, the rest of those of you who have been putting up your booths and demonstrating your capabilities to the community. We really appreciate it. Without you, there would not be a conference. So thank you. Now we'd like to share another message with from one of our federal delegates. Here's a short and brief message from Al Franken. So with that, we'll play the video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Al Franken, and I'm sorry I couldn't join you today. You know, it's because of your hard work that Minnesota is an international leader in biomedical research and development. You save lives by providing high-tech solutions to medical problems around the world, and in the process, you provide high-quality jobs to tens of thousands of Minnesotans. Because the work you do is so vitally important, it's critical that our nation's laws do everything possible to encourage that work. The medical device tax would cut into the proceeds that currently go toward research and development and workforce training. I understand that by taxing your first dollar in sales, the tax will also disproportionately harm small companies and startups that may not be turning a profit yet. I'll be honest with you, the tax is going to be very difficult to repeal while everyone in Washington is looking for more revenues, but I am committed to finding a responsible way to repeal the tax, and I won't stop until I do. I've also been working to improve the processes at the FDA that can often keep your products from getting to the patients who need them in a timely way. I worked with you to develop a reauthorization package for the medical device and prescription drug user fees, which will help you bring your cutting-edge products to patients more quickly and safely. I look forward to hearing from you about how implementation of the law is going, and please don't hesitate to reach out to my office if you have any concerns. Thank you again for your extraordinary work. You make our families and our economy stronger and healthier, and I look forward to continuing our work together.
One more time, I want to repeat to all of you to ask your help. Senator Franken has been another tremendous advocate for our industry, and all of our legislators need your help and your support. So please keep sending your information, giving your opinion, expressing your or telling your story of your company and your situation, because they need our help and our support as they try to affect legislation in D.C. Okay, this is my last time up here today, and I'm about to turn it over for closure, our final plenary session. But I wanted to take just one moment off script here, and I want to ask for your support in offering a round of applause to the LifeScience Alley staff and all our volunteers and the people who have helped to bring this to you. It's always amazing to me, since it's not my area of expertise, how much work goes into putting on an event like this, and the people, the staff of LifeScience Alley have done a phenomenal job. So thank you very much, and please join me in congratulating them. There's our final premier sponsor of the day that is going to be introduced in a moment is Greater Msp. And I'll be introducing Jeffrey Rainey from Greater Msp, who is a project manager. For those of you who are not as familiar with Greater Msp, because it's a relatively new organization, they are a phenomenal partner to us. Greater Msp, known as the Greater Minneapolis-St. Paul Regional Economic Development Partnership, is a public-private authority formed functionally as a regional marketing organization. For the first time in our history, we have one voice speaking for our region. It's fantastic. And there are more than 140 regional investors so far that have invested in Greater Msp, and many of these partner organizations are aligned to retain business expansion within the 13-county metropolitan area of Minneapolis-St. Paul. For the first time, like as I said, we now have one organization that speaks with one voice, and it's fantastic. It's been really effective. The work of the staff of Greater Msp is being felt around the world with offices in China and other places that are opening. And we're very proud to call them partners. So with that, I'd like to invite Jeffrey Rainey to come up here and introduce our afternoon, our final plenary session. So thank you very much, and welcome, Jeffrey, to the podium.
Thank you, Dale. It is our privilege to be a premier sponsor of this, once again, phenomenal event. Welcome, attendees. Greater MSP's mission targets 5 industry segments: finance and insurance, innovation and technology, food and agribusiness, headquarters and business services, and of course, health and life sciences. Again, my name is Jeffrey Rainey, and I work on the business investment team. Our role is to connect with those companies who have expansion projects, identify their needs, and bring in the necessary partners and resources to land that project in the appropriate local community. LifeScience Alley is an invaluable strategic partner in helping us identify those prospects, thereby ensuring that the region continues to build upon its robust legacy of success and prosperity in the life sciences arena. Together, our collective efforts will yield future expansions for the region. Apart from the net new jobs and capital investment from these companies, the trickle-down effect will benefit area suppliers, logistics, and other critical service providers. In short, life science businesses will continue to prosper in this region, and their people will prosper. And Greater Minneapolis-St. Paul is open for business. And now, without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing our afternoon plenary session titled 2012 Election Results, the Future of American Healthcare. In the midst of the most complex paradigm shift in the history of American healthcare, the White House and Congress have moved significant amounts of legislation that are reshaping the landscape in which our companies participate. Now that the election has passed and the political participants for the next congressional session are known, we turn our attention to how companies need to be poised to improve patient health and business outcomes. Several key opinion leaders and experts in public policy are here today to discuss the political implications of the election and the way forward. I'd like to introduce Shaye Mandle, Chief Operations Office and Vice President of Government and Affiliate Relations at LifeScience Alley, who will be moderating today's panel discussion. Shaye?
Well, good afternoon. It's always great to have the last panel. I'm actually really excited about what we're doing here today. So, of course, when we conceived of this and bringing together how we analyzed the 2012 election, there was a chance that things could change dramatically. And in fact, as you all know, nothing changed. And in some ways, that actually makes today's conversation, I think, even more significant, more important. What we got in the election essentially was confirmation that the path we've been on is the path that all of us need to adapt to, prepare for, and be ready to implement. Over the past few years, whether it's healthcare reform, FDA reform, we've had a lot of legislation on the table, and 2013 and beyond now promises to deliver new challenges and new opportunities. So when we put this panel together again, what I wanted to do was get a collection of a lot of really good people who really know what's happening both in Washington and around the country, who are the key advisors to our key life science industries, as well as big players in the market about how we need to be dealing with the FDA and with the Affordable Care Act. And so I'm really excited for the group of folks that we have here today. I'm going to introduce them individually and have them come up, and then we'll sit down and have a little fireside chat for the remainder of our day. Rob Clark currently serves as Vice President of Healthcare Modernization at Optum, the multi-billion-dollar services, IT, and health management solutions business of United Health Group. Rob is responsible for advancing Optum's public policy and communications initiatives to improve the healthcare system. He leads cross-functional groups and liaises with colleagues across United Health Group and Optum to develop strategies, policy positions, and action plans to address policy areas such as new payment methodologies and systems. Prior to his current role, Rob was Senior Director of Corporate State Government Affairs for Medtronic, where he was responsible for leading Medtronic's legislative and public policy programs in all 50 states, and Rob has been a longtime great friend of LifeScience Alley. So please welcome Rob Clark. For the past 7+ years, Brent Del Monte has served as Vice President for Federal Government Relations with BIO, the Biotechnology Industry Organization. In this role, Brent serves as the lead lobbyist for a trade association representing more than 1,100 life science members. During Brent's time in federal government affairs with BIO, the association has successfully worked for the enactment of priority legislation, including the pathway for the approval of biosimilars at the FDA, the Therapeutic Project Discovery Tax Credit, increased funding for the NIH and FDA, and 2 reauthorizations of PDUFA, including important reforms to the accelerated approval pathway at FDA. Please join me in welcoming Brent Del Monte. As Vice President for Public Policy and Government Affairs at Bayer Healthcare, Ray Frost is responsible for developing, coordinating, and executing the public policy and legislative agenda for Bayer Healthcare. Previously, he served as Executive Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy with AZI Incorporated, and there he was responsible for managing the legislative and public policy strategies and advocacy engagement, and Ray led AZI's healthcare reform team, a cross-functional team of executives who are developing new business models to compete in the rapidly changing marketplace as a result of healthcare reform. Ray also has a long history here in Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Ray Frost. And finally, last but certainly not least, Mark Leahey is President and CEO of MDMA, the Medical Device Manufacturers Association, a leading trade association in Washington, D.C. that represents hundreds of research-driven medical technology companies. Mark's responsibilities include advocating on behalf of the entrepreneurial sector of the medical device industry to Congress, the FDA, CMS, and other federal and state agencies. And Mark has lobbied for a more reasonable user fee for smaller companies, worked to open access to the hospital marketplace by challenging the exclusionary and anti-competitive nature of certain large group purchasing organizations, as well as to ensure that medical device technologies get adequate reimbursement. Please join me in welcoming Mark. All right, so with this group on board, our plan today was really to put a couple big topics on the table. All of you are familiar with them. What we really want to talk about from this cross-section of biotechnology, medical device, healthcare insurance, IT tools, and pharmaceutical expertise is looking forward at what we should be expecting relative to the FDA as well as the Affordable Care Act. And so let's start with the FDA. This year, as you all know, the Food and Drug Innovation Safety Act, FDASIA, or as Commissioner Hamburg says, FDASIA, was passed. PDUFA user fees, MDUFA, GDUFA, and a host of other FDA reforms. So as a starting point, and I want to start with Rob, because from Optum's perspective, you don't think as much about the FDA regulatory environment, but I know there's some unique challenges. So Rob, going forward into 2013, what are some of the key regulatory issues related to the agency that you guys are looking at and that some of the providers of our other products should be thinking about?
Sure, well, I'll start by, some folks may not know completely the scope of Optum. So Optum is really the health IT, services consulting, and care management business of United Health Group. And so our customers span the horizon. We have payer customers. We work with hospitals, physician practices. We work with employers. We work with governments. And we also work with life science companies like many of you here. And so our perspective of the FDA sort of fits within that realm, as you can imagine. So from an FDA perspective, we're particularly interested over the next 18 months or so around HIT and what the FDA is looking at in terms of regulation of HIT products. There's been some IOM reports out, as many of you may know. There are, the ONC is, the Office of National Coordinator for HIT is anticipated to put out a report, this month or next on this. But this realm of mobile applications, the realm of HIT products, and what amongst those products are going to be regulated by the FDA and how, that is of keen interest here, and it's going to be very critical to how these products can underpin things like accountable care and many of the other sort of concepts within the Affordable Care Act around payment reform and so forth. So we're paying very close attention to that because the underlying modernization of the system is what's going to facilitate some of that care coordination, and how the FDA sort of weighs into that space is going to be very interesting to us.
And Mark, I actually want to ask you, because in FIDASIA this year, probably some of the most significant changes are relative to the medical device industry. And so you represent a host of companies that are also Life Science Alley members, and a lot of the smaller companies that deal with some unique issues. So as we go forward, implementation of the MDUFA performance standards are going to be a big issue. What should our companies be thinking about in terms of going forward? What should we really be expecting? What's your perspective on, if you're a company today, what are you advising your members in terms of planning for the implementation in 2013?
Sure. Well, I think when we started this process, these negotiations take quite a bit of time, actually, 2 years in the making and a year plus with the negotiations with FDA. And we spoke with our, close to 300 member companies at the outset. The biggest concern they had with FDA was the variability and the lack of consistency. In past user fee negotiations, and actually Brent was up on the Hill in the early days when this started, we were kind of focused on review times and FDA days. And really, the more we looked at this, that's really the output. The input here should be, the process improvements. And if you put more granularity into certain process improvements, like earlier interaction, ensuring that the questions that FDA are asking are relevant to your submission, and they ask all the questions at the outset based upon a complete review of the submission, not kind of death by 1,000 cuts. And Heather Rosecrans actually was a 30-year veteran at FDA and ran the 510K program for 18 years. She's our VP of Regulatory, and she kind of explained it best by saying you start off with a funnel of the submission, and as you proceed with the FDA, the number of issues should get smaller. But unfortunately, the last few years, it would get wide, then smaller, and get wide again. And so really, we focused on getting rid of the variability. And so I think, for submissions starting October 1st, because that's when the MDUFA 3 cohort starts, companies should be seeing some of these administrative improvements start. For example, there's more structure around the pre-submission process. So even before you file a 510K or a PMA, there are interactions in place, communications take place, and what exists now that didn't exist before, you can memorialize those discussions in meeting minutes. And the key there is that if the reviewers change and there has been a lot of turnover, you have something to hang your hat on saying, wait a second, this is the commitment that was made. FDA always has the ability to change their mind, but there is a threshold trigger in place moving forward as well that says they have to have valid scientific evidence to suggest and warrant that there's a patient safety issue if they want to change their mind, and that requires management concurrence. So those are the types of things that are put in place. They take effect October 1. I think there is issues about training and an organization like CDRH with 1,400 individuals. Getting consistency is going to take time, but we've given them the resources, we've put the systems in place. We have a lot more accountability in the back end as well as it relates to not just performance related to FDA time, but now there's performance goals on total time, shared outcome goals, and more granular reporting on a quarterly basis. So all these things should come together, hopefully, and result in patients getting more timely access to these products.
And Brent, I'd love, here in Minnesota, we've got one of the fastest growing pharmaceutical and biotechnology communities, although small, faster growing than most other states. You've been through this a long time. Certainly PDUFA's got consistency in terms of what's transpired. But as we look into new regulations around biosimilars, even GDUFA. What can some of our community members in the pharma space and biotech space be expecting that we haven't seen before FDASIA?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. I think a couple things. One is we need to make sure FDA, irrespective of user fees, we need to make sure FDA is appropriately funded by the Congress through the general appropriations for the fact that they are going to have so much on their plate this year with the implementation of not only medical device user fees and prescription drug user fees, but they then went out and created 2 new user fee programs, biosimilar user fees and generic drug user fees. They are going to be so incredibly busy, and also not as part of the PDUFA package, but we have a new biosimilars law, which was created as part of the Health Care Act from a couple years ago, and they need to implement that. So the things we mostly have our eyes on at Bio, first and foremost, what do we care about the most in PDUFA? And that would be the new molecular entity review process to ensure that as a company comes forward with a new product, that there is more consistency in the review. Additionally, a number of our smaller companies, and 90% of Bio and its companies are companies who happen to find themselves in the pre-revenue space. They are working on their first product and they have not had that approved yet. They had found that the communication with FDA was inconsistent, and this new enhanced communication effort will have FDA dedicating resources to better communicating with new filers. So that's going to be very important. And last, as it relates to just what was in PDUFA that we cared about, accelerated approval is a approval mechanism at the FDA, which has been around for 20, 25 years. It really was started administratively when the FDA really felt the need to get more products to respond to the HIV/AIDS crisis of the late 80s approved quicker. And it was later put into law, and it's worked really well for products for the HIV/AIDS space, as well as for cancer oncology products. It didn't work well for many other products, and it's a mechanism which would, if you impact an endpoint, you get a quicker review. And we think we got some reviews in that package, which will allow it to be used by not just effectively used by folks in the HIV/AIDS space and oncology space, but by folks in other disease states. And the last thing I would mention, as you create a new user fee for anticipating applications on biosimilars, we always said that we wanted to ensure that the new biologics and new drugs did not see their reviews slow down by the creation of this other user fee act. And FDA did commit in the legislation not to take money away from the new and innovative products for the approval of biosimilars. That was very important to us.
And Ray, I wanted to ask you, so representing Bayer, as a company, you play in a lot of different spaces, including significant role in the pharmaceutical industry as well as devices. And so as we continue to move forward, and I know you've been aware of our activities with the MDIC and some of these issues, FDA is going to have to continually be looking at combination products, individual suitors like Bayer that are bringing different products to market. Going forward through these packages and just FDA regulation at a complex company like Bayer, what are some of the unique issues that you all are facing and looking at, the companies that are looking to move into combo products, that are even looking into the combination of IT as it plays into devices? What are some of those key issues that you all are focused on at Bayer?
So I at the threat of repeating everything that's been said, because I agree with everything, and
We'll
I
start
don't want
with you on first on the next.
I don't want to repeat this, what's been said, but I think the transparency, the consistency are very important. Having a better sense of, during the review process, not at the 7th month, having a better sense at, month 2 or month 3, what some of the issues might be so you can tackle them when you get further down the line is a very important thing. I think the one thing that hasn't been said that is very high on our chart right now, and I'm sure these folks would agree, is the potential, and I underscore potential, for the impact to the FDA and other agencies as well, of sequestration, which is deficit reduction, something that Congress has already agreed to, and then, you know, a fiscal cliff package. You know, the FDA is right in the hairs of the sequestration package, which was part of the Budget Control Act. There is the potential for a fairly significant cut to the FDA. And if Congress doesn't change, which they certainly may, that is highly concerning to us. And why is it concerning to us? Just probably like other companies. We actually just got a product approved by the FDA about 2 months ago for colorectal cancer. We have a product being submitted in December for prostate cancer. And we have a women's healthcare product that has a PDUFA date of January. So those are some, we're right in the potential throes of FDA being significantly reduced in terms of funding. So that's a high concern for us right now.
So I want to move on a little bit because I know, again, everybody's got to get on airplanes. We've got limited time, and we really do need to talk about the Affordable Care Act. And I know you all, in terms of our attendees, you've seen a lot of different conversations about the Affordable Care Act today. So what I really want to do is put a couple of questions on the table for each of you. One of those questions is, you know, what are the most pressing issues that we have clarity on today in terms of the implementation of the ACA? So for those things that we know or think we know, what are some of the key issues relative to the industry or the company that you all represent to share? And then what are the blind spots? What are some of the key issues that we don't have answers to that are keeping you, your organizations, and your companies up at night? And Ray, let's go ahead and kick it off with you so you get to take everybody's thunder first.
So I'll come at it with an opinion of, at least from our perspective, my perspective in dealing with it for the last 3 years, there's probably still more unknown than there is known. Just in the last 3 weeks since the election, we were talking about this just briefly before, there actually have been, to my number, and the number may be more because the one just came out today, there have been 9 proposed rules or final rules since the end of the election. You know, up to the election, a lot of folks were looking forward to what the federal government was going to do with essential health benefits and a variety of other rules that under healthcare reform had to be done. And the federal government remained fairly silent on that. But since the election, we've had, at least on my count, 9 that have come out. There may be more. One of those is the essential health benefits. That one, I think, is a very important one that I think everyone should be paying attention to. It probably is a little bit more impactful on the pharmaceutical side than maybe the device side, and we were talking about that. But I still think the way individuals now are going to potentially choose their health insurance, you know, you're going to have 30 million new people come into a system. The essential health benefit is going to be a consistent benefit across all 50 states. It's defined by the federal government. What does that look like? So, for example, how are prescription drugs covered? How might devices be covered? And then how individuals go in and out of picking their insurance that's actually going to cover themselves and their family. And then I think the other big market dynamic that we're trying to understand, and there's lots of opinions out there on it. I know Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, and Congressional Budget Office has done some analysis, is what do the small employers do once 2014 comes? So, for example, very quickly, think of the employer who employs 100 people or less. Retention, for whatever reason, may not be a top priority for them. They're in a sector where, you know what, if they have people coming and going, it's not that big of a deal. What do they do with health insurance? Health insurance for those folks have been the highest cost on their balance sheet for a long time. Do they decide to drop them and put these people into the state exchanges? What does that mean for how the market may change? I think it has, and I know others have said this in terms of some analysis, it has the potential to have a significant impact. And I think we need to wait and see on that, though. So those are probably the 2 ones I would say.
And Brent, from your perspective, I mean, you've got a huge membership base, 1,100 companies, big, small, and there's a lot of effect of the implementation of the ACA, both on your members in terms of what they're delivering and products, but also companies. What are some of the unforeseen challenges that you guys are most concerned about, including those that might be relating to the fiscal cliff debates?
I would begin by noting, and it's an unknown to me, I think to many folks, is right now states are making determinations about exchanges, are they going to participate in Medicaid expansions and the like. So I don't think any of us have the answer to that. I do not. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I would say one unknown, and I'm very interested to see how it plays out. Hopefully it will not play out, because this is the one thing in the Healthcare Act we said we strongly disagreed with, was this new commission, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, IPAB, which is going to, if certain targets are not hit in terms of Medicare growth, is going to make recommendations which will go into effect unless the Congress overturns them, about Medicare spending and what are they going to select if they do select. We are very concerned that it would be creating a mini bureaucracy of unelected individuals who will have great sway over reimbursement in America. And reimbursement, Shaye's right to note that, and I noted, most of our companies, 90% of our companies, don't make money. They rely entirely on the kindness of strangers, the venture capital community, and the public markets. And sending signals to these communities that the reimbursement might not be, if you overcome the threats to your IP, if you overcome the threats to developing a product, just naturally the science, at the end of the day, you may get into a situation where there's not going to be the ability to recoup their investment and your investment. So seeing how the IPAB, if it's not overturned, how that plays out is, I don't think anyone can predict. That certainly is an unknown, and that's something that does keep us up at night.
And Rob, you obviously occupy a unique position relative to the rest of the panel.
Sure.
So ACA implementation affects, Optum plays a completely different role. Certainly United Health Group and that broader community that you also have access to is in a different place. You can give us really a broad perspective. What should everybody be expecting? What are you guys really working on?
I'll tell you, one of the things we're very focused on is, and this was true before the Affordable Care Act, you guys, we all may recall that costs were escalating out of control before the Affordable Care Act. We can debate whether or not the provisions of the Affordable Care Act per se are going to stop that growth, but it's still growing. The bottom line is, one of the things we're very interested in is that cost, quality, and access part of the Affordable Care Act, in terms of bringing costs under control, new payment models, new ways of going at it. And I think, with the election past us, the Affordable Care Act in place, I think you're going to see an escalation of people forming accountable care organizations, doing medical homes. There's a lot of funding in the bill for CMMI pilots, the Medicare Shared Savings Program, the Pioneer ACO program, so forth. So all that stuff, I think you're just going to see continued acceleration around that. We're very interested. We are partnering a lot with these ACOs, both if they're payer-led, provider-led. So I think there's just a complete open field sort of opportunity for new collaborations, people coming together to form, these entities in terms of how are we going to deliver care in much more of a sort of a capitated, fee-based, value-based way. And I think for this audience and this industry, knowing a little bit about this space, having come out of it, is where are we going to fit in that? Where is the med tech industry going to fit in that discussion and in that equation? I think there's a lot of opportunity with devices that do remote monitoring, that provide real-time data, the types of information that people will want to make decisions about care at the point of care, to be brought to bear in those conversations. So we are aligned in these sort of organizations. We've got payer customers, we're doing it through providers and hospital practices. We're doing it both the infrastructure and the IT layer, as well as sort of the governance and quality metrics and value layer. And so we just think there's a lot of energy in that there's going to be a lot of that going on. The law prescribes some of it. It doesn't prescribe all of it. And so I think there's a lot of area for innovation and new things to happen. And so we're keenly interested in that and how that comes together.
Mark, when you hear Rob talk, and he's a former device guy too, so he's starting to give you a hard, when you hear these notions about devices, especially focused on remote patient monitoring and that being a huge opportunity, but then at the same time, we're always dealing with this fight about the cost curve and where devices fall in that. So as the ACA comes in and Rob sort of paints a picture of opportunities, but also, you and I have conversations about these threats, what are some of the things from the med tech industry that you think we really need to be focusing on to be able to meet some of these new demands of, the system that has gotten out of control in terms of cost.
And I'd say there's probably three. iPad, obviously, Brent mentioned is a priority, but I'd say there's two short-term, and then the third is a little broader cost issue. I think, first and foremost, the key issue we're focusing in on, obviously, is the device tax. And this is going to have a dramatic impact on a company's ability to continue to develop innovative technologies, given that, 98% of the companies have fewer than 500 employees. And the IRS issued their final rule this morning. Not much relief there at all. But fortunately, and this is a credit to Shaye and to Dale and the folks at LifeScience Alley, the Minnesota delegation has been second to none. Congressman Eric Paulson led the efforts in the House to repeal the tax this summer with 37 Democrats. That's a significant bipartisan showing in this environment. And then Senators Klobuchar and Franken have been leading the efforts in the Senate as well. And so I think there's momentum. Obviously, time is running short, but I'm still confident that when folks on both sides of the aisle look at the impact that this tax on the top line is going to have on jobs, innovation, patient care, they'll recognize that this tax can't take effect. The other short term is on the Sunshine Act. The OMB right now, the final rule is under review at OMB. So this is going to be another cost that companies tracking payments to physicians. Some of the large ortho folks have been doing this as part of DPAs with the Department of Justice, but this expands beyond that. So I think that's another short-term implementation issue that companies need to be very aware of, because once this final rule is out, I think they'll probably have maybe 90, 180 days to implement. So, if you haven't been paying attention to that, you need to. And then longer term, and I would agree with what was said earlier, whether it's in the context of the ACA or prior to or moving forward, there's no doubt, if you ask what's the biggest issue in 2013, it's the cost of care. I think everybody recognizes that it's not sustainable. The key question is, what are the solutions? I think from the device industry, we have a pretty compelling story to tell. It was just in the earlier session. Of the $2.6 trillion spent in healthcare, devices represent just under 6%. According to the AHA, when you look at hospital spend, 60 to 70% of the spend in a hospital is on labor costs. 4% is on devices, I think 8 to 12% on drugs, biologics. We're not the cost driver here, and in fact, but a lot of times technology gets, I think, the focus. Maybe hospital administrators view their labor as fixed costs. We're variable, so they try to swipe it. But I think proactively, the life science community, when you look at chronic disease management, 75% of healthcare costs, chronic disease management, our products up here can extract tens of billions of dollars out of that system. So it's part of this educational process, and it's a real opportunity to really flip the script and encourage and educate folks that our technologies are the solution to the healthcare cost problem, not the problem itself. And of course, that's going to take a lot of effort, because there are going to be conflicting views. But I think, again, there's a compelling story to tell. We just need to be proactive, and everybody in this room engaged through LSA and Bio and MDMA and others to really get that story out there.
And,
Can I say one thing to that?
Please.
I would totally agree. I think people in this room know that this is the challenge, right? The trick here, right, is to be able to demonstrate that value both clinically, cost effectively, through economic value and so forth. So, I think that is going to be, and again, I know folks in this industry already know this, but this is going to be the challenge of this industry, is to come together with evidence, both clinical, cost evidence. I say that somewhat self-centeredly. Optum is working with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, to do just that. It is a great opportunity to do that and to shape yourself as part of the solution, and to demonstrate what the relative value is within a given therapy or a given condition. So it's a great opportunity.
And not to jump on Shaye, but maybe there's an opportunity. One of the things, obviously, you've been in the space. Could you get a sense on, when you look at cost and value, the two kind of key elements are, all right, what are the time horizon by which you're measuring the outcomes? And then is cost, how do you really calculate costs? Is it the price of the technology? Is it the shorter stay in hospitalization, the productivity of that patient coming back? Because I think those are all things when our folks try to model things out. Some of that is squishy. So do you have best practices that you can share?
What I would say is, I think all that's up for grabs, because I think in these ACO environments, people are saying, what is the metric? What is the metric I want to be judged on? There's some prescription there in terms of what the federal government or CMS may think that metric should be from a clinical perspective. But people are still very anxious, or that whole notion of what is the right metric, what is the right thing to measure, what is the right outcome we're looking for. I think that stuff's very much in play. And so I think, again, it's an opportunity. And this is, I think, one of your original questions before we got here too was about new collaborations and new ways to sort of skin the cat, if you will. And I just think that it's a new opportunity for device companies to sit down with payers to sit down with providers, all the above, to sort of map out what is the true metric we ought to be judged and paid on, and for everyone to put some skin in the game.
Which is, I'm glad you raised that again, Rob. That's kind of where I wanted to eventually get in terms of tying this up. So I think everybody on this panel is acknowledged in giving everybody sort of advice about, everybody sort of knows this and everybody sort of knows this. And so there's these broad concepts about the challenges that we face, the questions people are asking. There seem to be great new opportunities, but again, Mark's asking for a little more definition to pursue those. So Rob, I'll start with you, but I really want all of you, jump in. I'd love everybody to leave here with a thought about a potential collaboration, or maybe not even something beyond just, okay, can we get device and pharma companies together? But,
Sure.
How should folks be approaching perhaps collaborators they haven't approached in the past? What's going to make the most sense as we look to cost to drive things? And Rob, we'll start with you, but everybody jump in. Are there some really unique opportunities that people really perhaps aren't thinking about or could use some advice on how to approach going forward?
Yeah, I would just say, one that comes, I sat through the discussion on big data and analytics, and I think, again, another a very significant area, I think, for 2013 is the bringing together of large sets of data, aggregating that data, and starting to make some prescriptions about that. But one of the things that was talked about in there, I know at Medtronic there was a lot of work going on in this area. I'm sure Boston and St. Jude doing the same, but looking at active medical devices that are implanted, feeding that information into the EMR. I think there was a discussion in the Wall Street Journal about some of this over the last week, in terms of real-time, accessible data that can be fed in through the EMR, how that happens, how the device company is paid for that. All of that, I think, is part of this equation, particularly then now when you look at a fee-for-value versus fee-for-service kind of model. And so I would say HIT vendors working with device companies, how does that information flow into EMRs? Who owns that information? How is that information then aggregated and analyzed? I would say that there's nobody better to analyze that data than a medical device company. They've been doing it for years. And so, there's opportunities, I think, for med device companies in that area. The other is, I mentioned earlier, sort of HIT products. This notion of HIT products being regulated by the FDA. We work with a lot of HIT products, EMR vendors, absolutely scared to death, right? And they have no idea how to approach the FDA. So I think there's enormous, again, partnering opportunity there with companies that really understand the FDA and how to move a product through the FDA. I could see some marriages between HIT and the medical device industry in that perspective. So I think it's kind of, everybody's kind of in their chair or in their silo, but I think all the chairs are being rearranged. Hopefully we're not on the Titanic, but the chairs are definitely being rearranged, and I think you just want to have a chair when the music stops, I guess is the analogy I would use.
Yeah, I've seen something, and remember, my role is one of as a lobbyist for a trade association. So we have member companies that make up our board. I have not worked for a company, nor am I familiar with how these companies interface. I'm not as familiar as others on this panel. So let me just tell you some observations. I've seen in this past year at different bio meetings, more meetings between our companies, both large and small, and private payers than I've seen at any time since I've been at Bio, which is 7 years. And I think that's because, as companies, they have suggestions about how FDA can work better and how CMS can work better. That's the approval government and the reimbursement. But we always strive to get more consistency in those two agencies. Now I think there's a desire to see more consistency amongst the private payors. I've heard CEOs say over and over again the lack of consistency. And these are private organizations, so I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know what's allowable under antitrust law. So I'm not suggesting anything, but just better consistency amongst the payers and the metrics that they use to determine what is value would go a long way. And part of it's on us in terms of working with them. These CEOs tell me all the time, you know, so-and-so over here will approve reimbursement for our product in 2 days, while someone else over here will take 2 years. And I don't know how to drive that consistency, but I know there's a real thirst for it. I think the thirst exists on both the payer and the innovator side.
So from my perspective, I think there's two. One is risk-sharing type contracts. I don't think it's extremely innovative. Some companies do it, especially in the chronic disease management. But having the partnership with the payer, especially in potentially these new ACO models, to figure out actually what they're going to look like, because no one really knows yet. The partnership of risk sharing, saying, hey, if we have a device or if we have a drug and this is the patient population, and if it's not being effective, it's not working, the payer doesn't have to pay for it. You've seen that in Europe a little bit. I think that's an option. And I think the other thing, to piggyback a little bit what Brent said, one of the things when we did this healthcare reform task force in the previous company I had worked for, one of the things we mentioned was getting payers involved in your clinical trial design. When we had said that in the room of about 15 different executives, man, you should have seen some people who had been in the industry 20, 30 years, their heads almost exploded. This was like, God, we can't do that. And then the second thing we said on top of that, well, not only should we be doing that, we should also get patient advocacy groups to the extent we can involved in the design, especially in the area of like oncology. You know, how important are certain side effects, toxicities of certain drugs, neuropathies? Are they important? And get them involved early. Get them involved in the phase 2A area. It's just feedback. It creates a partnership. You don't have to change your design if you disagree with them, but I think there's also a lot more willingness. Some companies actually have already started doing this. And then I'm going to take off my hat as a person who represents the industry for a year and more as a consumer of healthcare. One thing that concerns me greatly about being a consumer of healthcare, a father of 2 kids, is the lack of importance we now place upon physicians. The distrust that we have, unfortunately, I think our elected officials have on physicians, this whole Sunshine Act thing. You know, the fact of the matter is there's always bad eggs, and that's unfortunate. But the interaction, especially on the device side, between sales representatives, company representatives, and physicians is vital. That's how they get their education. That's a very important piece of this. And this Sunshine Act is going to be a significant detriment to that. It's going to be a significant detriment to patient care because of that. And then, you know, we haven't talked about it today, but the shortage of primary care physicians, the shortages of doctors that we have facing us in the next few years is traumatic. It's going to be significant. And if we don't figure out how to pay our doctors fairly, and Congress has to deal with the whole sustainable growth rate issue, it is a daunting issue that I think Congress doesn't understand. They continue to punt it. And I think as consumers of healthcare, we should all be concerned about it. I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, and Mark, I'll
Just
give you the last word.
Too quick, because I know we're coming up on time here. I think, and it stems from something that was said earlier, I think there is this recognition, while I agree, doctors need to continue to have a vital role in delivering care to the patients. There's no doubt that the hospital administrators are playing a more important role. And what we've seen, and this is certainly a flip in the last couple of years, and I think Kaiser's a great example where they're both the provider and the payer, where companies are proactively, and some of the country's best physician inventors and incubators are going in and saying, all right, what is it you need from it could be from a clinical standpoint, it could be from a delivery system reform. I mean, they want to get the best and brightest engineers to help work. And I think Kaiser actually has kind of mock floors set up in California where you can go in and kind of work within the system. It's not an easy question, because one of the physician inventors, who shall remain nameless, reached out to someone, and basically there was this, the response they got from the person from Kaiser was, please unsubscribe me. And this person is a very well-renowned physician inventor, Stanford, and he said, no, this is really who I am, and I really want to help out. And the response was, well, are you a for-profit? And he said, well, yes. And he's like, I can't work with you. Fortunately, he found the right person at Kaiser, and it all worked out. So I think that's a challenge. And then the second, and this gets to the payment side and the need for more data. I think there's a way, and you said earlier, Rob, everybody has to give a little bit here. And when you look at small companies particularly who may have 1 or 2 products, the evidentiary threshold they need to hit now to get to the market is dramatically different than sending away to Medtronic or Semel stuttered out. I mean, and these legacy products are on the market without that same threshold. And I think there's got to be a recognition, and everybody's got to give here, that for a new technology, and maybe this is where we don't want formal FDA and CMS collaboration because bringing 2 bureaucracies together actually slows things down even more. But a mechanism by which you can have a company say, you know what, I'm willing to do more post-market surveillance here beyond just what FDA would require, what the payers would be interested in. But there's got to be some sort of bridge reimbursement in that defined universe over a period of time to collect that data to allow some revenue to come in, and then based upon that data, determine whether you expand that coverage and that payment more broadly. So I think if there are ways to work innovatively to kind of bridge that, and maybe it is starting with CMS and then the private payers will follow, that's just if we keep on wanting more and more evidence and data before adoption, the small companies are never going to be able to hit that hurdle.
Well, it's been a big legislative year, election year. 2013 is going to be a year with a lot of implementation and also a lot of follow-on fights related to many of the issues that we did or didn't resolve this year. At LifeScience Alley, as we put this conference together with all of the activity this year and really such a thirst for what's happening both at the federal and state level, we thought it was really important to bring this group together. Personally, I really want to thank all you guys. I mean, Mark, Ray, Brent, Rob, each of these guys and their organizations have been incredibly supportive of LifeScience Alley. Each of them have given me good counsel and helped make us more effective and be strong partners in advocating for our industry. So I really want to thank you guys for coming in. I'm going to turn things over to our CEO, Dale Wallstrom, to close, but please join me in a big round of applause for these guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, Shaye, thanks for the promotion. I didn't know I was the CEO. We hope you've had a valuable experience and can translate today's insights and connections into new approaches and opportunities in the coming year. I would like to share a few brief reminders before you go. You will continue to have access to Event Mobi for a period after the event, so be sure to continue your networking into the new year. Plenary session videos and select speaker presentations from today's event will be available online at lifesciencealleyconference.org in mid to late January, so be sure to check back then. We will be sending out a post-event survey in the coming weeks and would greatly appreciate your honest feedback as it will help us to shape next year's conference. On that note, make sure to save the date for our 2013 conference being held November 20th here at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Thank you again for attending today and have a safe and happy holiday season. And I am going to bring our President and CEO, Dale Wallstrom, up here one last time to give you one last comment, so thank you.
Well, all I would do is just echo Ryan's thank you, and I also want to make sure that everybody has a great holiday, and I want to thank you all for being here. Again, I want to reinforce the importance of our sponsors and the participants, the people that come to help to create this community, because we are a strong community and we need to hold our hands and go at this together now, because it's a time when the entire industry is being reshaped. And events like this bringing us together is what helps to do that. So thank you all very much for being here. Travel safe going home, and have a great holiday season. Thank you. Bye-bye.